welcome to our show, Film Talk with AJ Dean. I'm AJ Dean, your host, and tonight, oh my gosh, hold on to your seat, get your popcorn out. This is going to be so much fun. We have the very special VIP Carlo J. Barbieri III, and he's a film director, editor, director, location manager, additional crew. He's done so many things, so many productions. Let's give him a super, super duper warm welcome. Hey, Carlo, so happy you're
Thank
here. I'm
you.
thrilled. How are you, love?
I am doing okay. I'm doing okay. I'm so excited to be on the show to talk about a whole bunch of stuff, and I look forward to getting right into it. But yeah, you're right. I have done a lot. My life is I've been very gifted for all the work that I've been able to achieve and all the stuff that I've been able to work on. And, for me, it's made me very humble and super respectful for, just, being with crew and being with film family and, just having the ability to kind of work on one job to go to the next, to kind of go on the next, and it's amazing the people that you can meet, because you're always working with different people. And sometimes you might get lucky enough to work with somebody you already know. You just never know when you start working on a film set, or a TV show or just anything really in general, really. It's a small world.
It really is. And for all your fans and supporters out there, I just want to let them know, and they know already, that on your father's side, your Hollywood connections, you're related to the famous John Cazale of The Godfather, and also Gatto Barbieri. And he was a famous,
Correct.
famous composer, right?
He was, yeah. So before we get to him, John Cazale is part of my family, but part of my father's side of the family. He breaks off somewhere in the tree line, but he is part of it. And Gatto, he is fully a Barbieri. I got to meet him once at a family reunion down in New York. And Garto is very famous for being a saxophonist. He's everyone knows him as that Latin saxophonist, jazz guy. He worked with Santana for a little bit, but for if anyone knows a little film called The Last Tango in Paris with Marlon Brando, you will know that the soundtrack is scored by Gatto. And when I got to meet him for this one-time family event, it's really funny. I shook his hand and I said, it's a pleasure meeting you. I have all your, vinyl. I keep hearing about you and the family and everything. You kind of give me some inspiration because I'm trying to go into sound producing or sound engineering. And he asked me, he's like, well, okay, well, what do you really want to do? And I said, I want to get into the film industry. And he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, best of luck. You're going to need it. Here's a whiskey and here's a Cuban cigar. You're going to need them. And that was it. That's all he said to me. And that was the only moment that we actually had some sort of connection. And I had the whiskey with him, I had the cigar with him, and we never really didn't get to talk that much after because he was off and gone. He kind of came in and went real quick, and so after that, that was it. He's no longer with us anymore. He passed away, I believe, in 2016 or 2015, somewhere around there. And of course, John Cazale is no longer with us anyway because he passed away in 1979, so way before me. But John Cazale, of course, is an all-time favorite, movie actor. I mean, he worked in Godfather, Godfather 2, Dog Day Afternoon, The Conversation, and The Deer Hunter.
Deer
Like
Hunter.
five, yeah, nominated films. And he's one of the guys that really inspired Al Pacino to become Al Pacino. And there's a wonderful documentary on John Cazale, and in it, Al Pacino says, if it wasn't for him, I don't know if I would actually be, the actor that I am, because he was such an inspiration. He really touched a lot of people, and I've heard a lot of good things about him throughout the family that is still left, and it just, it feels good, feels really good. I wish I could go back in time and meet him, but I don't have a time machine. So at least I got to meet one out of the two. So
That's right. And, Carlo, what a wonderful legacy that you are a part of. You're continuing film, continuing it on, and that's what they want. And also, I do want to let you know that that cigar, my interpretation of it is that cigar and that whiskey he was giving you his blessing. It's a very familiar family kind of thing. So you were being blessed
mhm.
to in the film industry by him, and I just think that's so beautiful, and I just love hearing stories about that. So let's get into it a little deeper and talk about you did a film masterclass educational program. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. All right. So back in 2018, I kind of get right into it. I went down to Texas in 28 at the end of 2018, and when I was down there, um, I was working for a company that ultimately didn't really work out very well. And so I was kind of floating around trying to figure out what to do in Austin because I was in a place that I didn't really know very well. I mean, Texas doesn't have a tax incentive anymore. And so it's mainly commercial based work now, right? I mean, they do have some shows that come in. Fear the Walking Dead was filming down there before eventually they got kicked out, but that's a whole thing in itself. But but Texas has Robert Rodriguez, has what's his name? A couple other great actors. They'll eventually pop in my head. But Robert Rodriguez is not that far away from UT in Austin, and his studio, Troublemaker Studio, he was, he's been pretty much the inspiration for all indie filmmakers, really, right? And so at UT, they have a wonderful film program, and they during 2019, I was kind of going to UT to talk to them about, hey, look, I have this program that I've been wanting to develop, and I would like to see if maybe it might actually work. Well, over the years that I've done really good stuff for a lot of good film family, um, they kind of owed me a little bit. And so I knew that a couple of my friends were working on a couple Netflix shows. And I said, hey, I would like to see if maybe I might be able to get in touch with a couple of executive producers. I might have a program, or at least I have a pitch that I would like to see if I can make a kind of like a project greenlight for students. And so a couple of my friends got me involved with a couple executives at Netflix, and I pitched it. And I said, "Hey, listen, I have something that I would like to showcase, and I might be able to bring this program to UT to ultimately maybe create a huge masterclass program." And the way that I designed it was, I also was going to build a film app with it, along with a Discord, and eventually, if let's say the program actually spawned it off, if the first season actually succeeded, I wanted to potentially bring it to other universities, and
Mhm.
maybe not just here in America, but across the world, and maybe actually make something out of it, like where other um, professors could actually take what I created and actually bring it and or do something different. And so the program as itself was supposed to be a 2 semester course, a very hard hitting advanced class. The first semester was a breakdown on my love, physical media, and to really push the students to instead of writing papers, because you go to film school, you're sitting down, you're getting bogged down for doing film history, right? So you're making all these papers. At the end of the day, do they actually do anything for you? And I always thought, no, they don't. Actually putting something in someone's hand and forcing them to do something gets them, you know, involved. They start learning, experience, right? And so I felt like that was something lacking, and that's why I created this program. So the first half, the students let's say if I had 40 students, they would break up into, 4 sets of 10. And then what they would do is they would take one film off the syllabus. They would do like a small mini doc, a product placement for that film, a critic corner, but the critic corner actually had a kind of a twist. Twist was they would have to build the critic corner to the decade of the movie that they had. They would have to use the terminology, they would have to use the wardrobe, and they would have to see the movie for the first time like they're seeing it during that decade. And they can't use anything after that movie. And so they would have to set it up like to pay respects to Siskel and Ebert. I think they're one of the greatest, film critics ever, really, and I always have some things with film critics, and even Robert, I don't always agree to everything that he said, but I would always say, oh, by the way, a film critic is necessary, right? And so I said, well, they would have to learn film criticism, they would have to learn film history, they would have to learn how to do product placement, and they would have to learn how to do marketing, right? So this is just the first part before they get into the second part. But there's one more kicker, and that was what would happen is that the students, after they got through a couple things, they would break up into 2 sets. One group A would then shoot one scene out of the movie, while group B had to do a mockumentary on group A, and then it would flip. So that's the first part. And then the second part is where they would have to do either a feature film, a TV pilot, or 2 short films. The TV pilot and the film would be handled by Netflix. However, if they did an independent project, they would have to fundraise everything themselves. And what they would have to do is they would have to get the 2 films in the film festivals. Netflix would come down, take a look, and then as a whole group, Netflix would sit them down and say, okay, now pitch us a feature or a TV pilot. If they did a TV pilot, the TV pilot would be 1 episode, but the TV pilot would have the ability to be turned into a real show if people voted on it, if they liked it very much. Yeah. And the film, of course, that would be a feature film, and that would have a rating system and stuff for all the students, And so I made this huge platform, and Netflix really loved it. They gave me a really good deal on it. And then 2020 happened, and COVID came in and ultimately killed the deal. But my goal is to ultimately bring it back. It's been taking me a while to kind of get back into the whole groove. I've had a lot of things happen to me since 2020, but my goal is that I would like to see if I can pitch it again and see what happened. The educational program, I think it's wonderful. I think it's really thought out, and hopefully, if someone really thinks that it's worthwhile, I would love to see if I can have an opportunity to bring it back.
Absolutely. And
I'm so
so
close.
so close. And so all of those universities out there that are listening and watching, or anybody who works for a university or knows people going to a university that may be interested in this is such a fascinating and wonderful concept. And it's a great masterclass that you have created by yourself. This is your plan, and there's such a hunger out there. There's a real hunger for people, young people who want to learn the film industry, and there's nothing like it. Yours is very unique, and it's very, very special. So
Yeah,
if
yeah,
anyone's interested,
I do agree.
get in contact with Carlo, okay? Because you're on Facebook. Your Facebook profile is Critical Studio on Facebook, and then you also have a YouTube channel, Critical Film YouTube channel, and then they can reach you on Instagram because you're on Instagram, right? So
I am. Yeah, I have 2 Instagram accounts, Critical Studios, and of course under my own name, Carlo Barbieri III. And after once we get in, I mean, there'll be links and everything for you,
Yeah.
so you can get to and everything, and then you guys can see all the wonderful things I've created. Because it's not only have I tried to create a show, I've also directed one feature film, and I've directed over 20 short films, which have all gone to different places. And the feature film I actually used as a stepping stone for myself to get into film, really. And like my career really started as doing I started off doing sound engineering, and from that pivot off to doing broadcasting. From broadcasting, I went into film. I went into live sports. I've gone into journalism. I've done pretty much the entire entertainment world. And I've done a lot of things. Worked on a lot of films, a lot of TV shows.
Yes, you've worked with William Shatner, Mark Hamill, Chris Hart, Stan Lee. You worked camera with him.
Stan Lee,
Amazing. You know,
Stan Lee so much.
oh my gosh, you worked on The Witch, Hypnotic in Texas, reality shows, Walking Dead in Atlanta, Ted 1, Ted 2, Black Mass. And you've also, tell us about your Leonard Nimoy
Oh
story.
yeah. I love Star Trek. I mean, I'm a huge nerd. As you can see, the wall of media behind me. This is yeah. So, man, this is okay. Let me focus for a second. Um, Before Leonard Nimoy passed away, uh, up here in Massachusetts, I'm from Mass. We have a little show called Chronicle, and Chronicle at the time, this was a long time ago now. But they did an interview with Leonard Nimoy, and he was down at his Cape House. And I got a phone call from a friend of mine, and he goes, "Hey, listen, Leonard, did you see the Chronicle thing?" I said, "Yeah." And he's like, "Well, look, there's a couple people that really want to do some more interviews with Leonard Nimoy. Would you like to be craft services? There's a guy that I know that wants to interview him for something, but he's going to be leaving, and there's only a short amount of time." And I said, "Yeah, I will gladly be craft services." So I go down to Leonard Nimoy's place. I show up with the van. I have all the food and everything, and I get there at 8 a.m. That was the crew time. That was the time I was supposed to be there. And next thing you know, uh, Leonard Nimoy's producer shows up, and he goes, "Excuse me, are you crew?" And I said, "Yep, I am the crafty. I'm here early, but I don't see any crew anywhere. There's no crew in sight." And he goes, "Yeah, you're the producer messed up the time, and your time's been pushed back. And I'm surprised no one told you." And I was like, "Oh, great." So I'm sitting there going, well, that's cool. My friend didn't bother calling me. No one told me at all. So I'm standing outside of Leonard Nimoy's place, and I was just like, wow, okay, so this is great. And so I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm gonna come back, and I'll try to reconvene. I'll call him up and see what's going on. But Leonard Nimoy comes out of the house, and he comes over and he goes, "No, no, no, let him in. Let him in. It's fine. Let him in." And I was like, yes. So score. So I walk in, I bring in all the water, I'm bringing in a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm setting up everything. I'm in the kitchen organizing everything. If I remember correctly, his producer was standing on outside on the back veranda, overlooking the ocean. And I looked over, and Leonard Nimoy was sitting at a little table, and he was looking out at the ocean, and he looked very sad. Looked like a sad puppy. Ultimately, Leonard Nimoy at that point was very sick. He had cancer, and he didn't want people to know about it. And so I walked over to him, and I was like, "Hey, Leonard Nimoy, I'm all set and ready to go. Is there anything I can do for you?" Because when I was craft services, I had a listing of everything that he could have, that he couldn't have. And so I said, "Hey, listen, I'm supposed to make breakfast for the crew, make sure everyone's okay. Um, do you want anything before I leave? Are you okay?" And he goes, "Have you had breakfast?" And I said, no, I have not. And he goes, well, I have not either. Let's make breakfast together. And so we're standing there. We make breakfast together. We go outside to eat, and we're overlooking the ocean. And it was a beautiful, beautiful morning. Was just perfect. And as we're kind of talking a little bit, but he's just intaking, the air and the breeze. And eventually looks over at me and goes, "Excuse me, can I ask you something?" And I said, "Yes, yes, yeah." And he goes, "I haven't had my morning walk. Would you be so kind to walk with me on the beach?" And I was like, "I will." So I grabbed his cane and took him down to the beach, and time stopped. There's just been a few times where time actually has stopped, really, for me, and this is one of them. And I'm standing there, we're talking, and he didn't want to talk about Star Trek at all. He wanted to talk about everything else but Star Trek because that's what everyone always talks about. He's Spock, you know. And I asked him, I said, "Hey, listen, look, I know you don't want to talk about Star Trek, but I'm going to try to get into something. I just need to verify something about William Shatner." And that's another story for itself. But he verified something about him, and I was like, "Okay, cool." And I said, "Hey, listen, look, I just want to let you know something. I actually own a laser disc of you promoting Laserdisc." And he stopped and he looked at me and he goes, Excuse me?" And I said, "Yeah, I own a massive film collection, and I have a really rare laser disc of you promoting Laserdisc." And he couldn't, he just stopped, and he was kind of flabbergasted, right? Because he wasn't expecting for me to say that. And I said, I said, "Look, other than you being Spock, having this and having, with In Search of and, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and, I kind of worked on Fringe a little bit, not too much, but I was able to get on that just a little bit." And I said, "Yeah, I have to say, it's really cool to have because it's extremely rare, you know." And and so we had one of the greatest conversations that I will ever have with probably anybody except for Stan Lee. And I got him back to his place. The crew showed up, and the producer, of course, is interviewing Leonard Nimoy. And at the end of everything, Leonard Nimoy turned around and said, "Excuse me, but you were one of the worst producers, uh, you know, uh, people interviewing me I have ever met. You see that gentleman over there, the guy that's the craft service? He is he should have interviewed me because me and him already had one of the greatest conversations ever." And I was like over there going, "Woo woo," I was on cloud nine, of course. But what happened was, and this is why I have a lot of respect for Leonard Nimoy. Um, I am out front, producer's flipping out on me, and he goes, "I'm not going to pay you your rate, and I'm not going to do anything. You spoiled everything." And he's all up in my face, and I was like, "Okay, well, that's cool." So Leonard Nimoy comes out, producer leaves, crew leaves, my friend leaves, and I'm just standing there, just still loading the van in. And he goes, "Hey, I saw that he was having a conversation with you. It didn't seem pretty heated." And I was like, "Yeah, he wasn't going to pay my rate." And he goes, "Well, what's your rate?" And I said it was 500. And he goes, "Okay." And he goes, "Do you think you could send me that laser disc?" And I said, "Yeah." And he goes, "I will try to see if I can sign it or do something for you on it." And I said, "Okay." So I did. I sent it to him, and he sent me back the laser disc. And guess what was in it? $500.
Wow, what a
He sent me that. Yeah. And I couldn't believe it. I was shocked. And after that, after I got it back, that's when he ended up passing away. Not that soon after. Yeah. And I a generation of his generation, are very humble and respectful, right? And these guys, they really tried to do something for, not just for themselves, but they wouldn't be here if they didn't have their fans, right? And so for them, like Leonard Nimoy, George Takei, Mark Hamill, a lot of other people, in that forum, really have a lot of respect for their fans, and they're very humble, and and you can actually have a community, a one-on-one conversation with them, because they want to know who you are, and you never know. And so I've been blessed. I've been able to work with Mark Hamill and all these other guys, and they're wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And if I could ever see Mark Hamill again, be great. But there's one person I do want to meet, and that's Patrick Picard, Mr. Jean-Luc Picard. He, if I could ever meet him, I think my life would be complete. So, anyway, that's just my thing.
Incredible.
But yeah, no. Other than doing that, yeah, I've worked on so many things over the years, and I've been pretty blessed. So.
Wow, thank you so much. It's such an honor to have you here. I'm absolutely thrilled. And what a beautiful story. You have that memory with Leonard Nimoy forever. That's yours and yours alone. And it's so special. It's so unique. And it just shows that how much of a nice guy you are as well, Carlo, because he opened up to you. He felt he could trust you. And what a special moment in time. And I understand how celebrities don't want to talk about certain things, and because they just want to be real and human, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah, they're just like all the rest of us. The thing about an actor is that they're a face on a screen, and that's their job. They portray, something that they're not, or something that they want to become. And that's what I love about actors. And that's what I love about sitting down and actually like getting them to think a little bit. Like for me as a director, I and there's two things I don't do. I don't like spoon feeding my audience, and I don't like spoon feeding my actors. I like giving them a challenge because I want them to become something. I want them to find something within themselves that can portray this character, that they're trying to develop, right? And sometimes, there might be a couple things where I'll have to, tell them, okay, this is what I'm looking for, and this is what this is what the character is and stuff. Just, to kind of give them a nice little bedding a track to get on. But after that, I want them to be hungry. I want them to challenge themselves in some sort of way. And I think as an actor, that is something you got to do. I mean, and it's really difficult to come from a stage to film, right? Because on a stage you're portraying yourself. You are, speaking to the audience, right? But as an actor, you can you can bring it down to reality. You don't have to like, you know, you know, oh yes, and oh this, and I can actually have a conversation. I can actually get angry. I can actually do improv, you know, and I don't have to like have billions of people looking at me, right? I mean, you could do that on stage too, but there's a different feel when you're coming off as an actor in the film world, because once you're in film and you go into a stage, you already have that ability to actually portray something for yourself, to actually, provoke and say something, uh, but and I don't know. I just love working with actors, and then when I'm working with crew, um, I of course I love working with PAs. PAs get, let's face it, they get shit on all the time. But the thing about a PA is that they're hungry. They really truly, they want it. They know they don't know what they really want, but sometimes you come across a PA, they're like, oh, I do want to go for camera. I do want to go for this. And usually, if I am in a directing standpoint or a producing standpoint, any PA that I work with, I give them the ability to work within, where they want to be. Because I feel like if they get their hands in and they actually do what they're hungry for, they'll bloom into something better, right? And, and I keep saying this, and, we don't have apprenticeships anywhere. The apprenticeships are gone, right? And so we have a lot of talent that's, a lot of crew that's getting older, and, they're passing on, or we have new people coming in, that don't really know anything. They don't have the experience levels or whatnot. And, a lot of people are jaded. A lot of crew members, they get burned, on certain things, or they burn bridges, or, they get hammered down, paychecks not coming in, people worrying about what, everything and everything, and so after a while, you see you see some crew that ultimately are spicy, and it's sad, really, right? Because we're all a film family. We're all working on other different projects, but the projects that we're working on, we're working with other film family, right? And if we all sink, with the Titanic, hopefully we can all swim together as a crew.
It's so important, you're right. And I love how you have that passion for teaching the next generation. Are you open to consulting the next generation? Are you open to
I
editing, your
Yeah, I love editing. So I guess for me, I got a photographical memory, unlike anything you're probably ever gonna meet. And this is where I'm gonna start teetering into this now. Um, Over the course of my two film collections, I have owned over 35,000 films. Yeah. And it's not just films, it's of TV, anime, all variety of different things. My first collection, my mega collection before I sold it in 2013 was so my film collection was 13,000 films, 2,000 posters, 10,000 vinyls, 400 books, and 5,000 games. Yeah. And I mainly owned VHS and Laserdisc. I also owned 158 millimeter and 16 millimeter film print. And I actually owned, and one day I really hope I can talk to Sam Raimi, because boy, I don't know if he would be really upset with me, or or call me a liar in some sort of fashion, but I salvaged Sam Raimi's Evil Dead on 35 millimeter print in 2006, and it was the greatest thing I ever held in my hand. I mean, I've held some pretty cool things in my hands, don't get me wrong, but salvaging that and finding that was probably one of the coolest things. And I've always wanted to talk to him about it, because I don't know what he would say. I don't know if he would be upset about it, but holding that was one of the coolest things, because for me, film preservation is so important, right? You know, and understanding film history is also important, but film preservation is extremely important. This is why I believe in physical media. Like, any one of these movies, you know, should never be left behind. And I think for film wise, if you're a filmmaker, or if you're a crew, or if you're just, a cinephile, you should watch everything that you get your hands on, because it's necessary. And yeah, you may not like the movies. And yeah, maybe you might, there's certain things that you might not want to see, or, like or dislike or whatever, or it could be, variety of other different things. But ultimately, in the end, film is very, very important, you
Mhm.
know?
As a film
So,
collector and film historian, thank you so much for sharing that. And what is your favorite or most prized possession then? What would that be, Carl?
oh boy, oh no. Um, oh, okay. Well, that's one. Okay. So, the late Misaguchi, I'm gonna say it wrong, but this right here is from Eureka. It's out of print box set. And it's a wonderful film. It has 8 films from 1951 to 1956, and these are all Japanese films. And they're absolutely wonderful. And unfortunately, no one's actually put this set out since it's been released. And this is one of the rarest Blu-rays box sets that's come out. And I would highly recommend, if you can ever get your hands on this, this is wonderful. I mean, like every single box set that I have is mostly out of print.
Yeah.
They're very limited. They only come out for a certain amount of runs, and then that's it. And so yeah.
Would you ever sell your collection or half of it or?
Oh boy. Well, funny thing is, when I sold my first mega collection in 2013, I did it for family, and um, I really owe my father for getting me into collecting. And I guess I'm just like father like son, really. My father was a very eclectic man. He's no longer with us anymore, but he bestowed collecting upon me, and how he did that was he worked for all the game companies. He actually worked for Nintendo the longest, really. He worked, and he did marketing distribution for all three game companies. So he worked for Nintendo from 84 to 93. He then pivoted over to Sega from 94 to 95, and then PlayStation from 96 to 97, and then went back to Nintendo in 98. But it wasn't just working in the game industries. My father also did architecture and design. He was a draftsman, and he worked on the Big Dig. He did a whole bunch of stuff, and that was his big passion. He also was a chef too. So my father was a whole bunch of stuff, but I didn't really know my father very well. And that's another personal story in itself. But when I finally got into his life around 99, 2000, officially, I realized that he had a massive game collection, which was over 16,000 games. And in 2001, he lost them all. It's another epic story. But in doing so, he knew I was going to go into an industry. And so he started building my mega collection by his own hands. And so in 2013, I had the ability to I was going to go to LA to do an internship with Bad Robot. But what happened was, at the time, it was either go to LA to go to Bad Robot or see my father pass away and see, my family kind of potentially erode. And I didn't want to do that. And so I put family first. And what I did was, when I sold the mega collection, I got my father the health care that he needed. I got my mom the health care that she needed, paid off a couple mortgages. And I've never been to LA, which is really funny. I've always worked on the East Coast. I've always either worked in Atlanta, Texas, all across the East Coast, Florida, and I worked on the Mandalorian a little bit down in Florida. So that was pretty cool. But yeah, collecting has been another big part of my life, and that's why I bring it in to whatever I do. I promote it. Like Criterion, Arrow, Vinegar Syndrome, Synapse, Blue Underground. The list can keep going on and on. But these guys are really doing Lord's work.
Yes.
So,
Oh, I love it. I just love this. And, look at the great collection behind you. It's a whole wall of very special and collectible, rare, box sets, things like you
yeah.
said, out of print. And would you part with any of those if anyone wanted to?
Uh, well, I sold my first collection. I've had to part with a little bit of my second collection, but my second collection currently, right now, as it stands, it's 8,566 titles, and
Whoa.
I'm getting to my 13,000 mark because I'm doing it by my own hands, not my father's. But yeah, eventually, and I have sold some things, but I've gained some more stuff. But I don't have VHS Laserdisc anymore, or any more film print. I
Why
mainly
is that?
do out of print.
Why is that?
Um, it's because of space. It
Oh,
takes a
okay.
lot of space. Blu-rays and DVDs are a little bit
Yeah.
more smaller than a VHS, but these box sets also take up a lot of space, and the other thing is that, another reason why I say physical media is because, you get special features, unlike streaming, you can't get any of that, and I think streaming, is there's benefits to streaming because you can do it on the go.
Mhm.
But if you're looking to be a cinemaphile, if you're looking to get something a little different to, see what, behind the scenes were, and audio commentaries and anything else, you're not going to get that in streaming. And a lot of these movies are not on any other streaming services, right? And now we have these streaming wars, and there's a lot of lot of films that are still only on VHS and Laserdisc and beta that have never pivoted over to DVD or Blu-ray or now or even 4K, and so we have a lot of films that have disappeared.
Mhm.
We have had, and that's just, and that's, I mean, that's the nature of everything, right? I mean, film is going to degrade. VHS is going to get magnetized. Laserdisc is going to have laser rot, right? And even DVD and Blu-ray will have the same thing over time. And like I have this wonderful quote for myself, and I say, "We are the harbingers of history. Whatever we collect, we are preserving in our own small way in our own homes." You know, and it could be a bottle cap, it could be a baseball card, it could be physical media, it could be a poster, it could be almost anything in the world. But whatever we collect, we are the harbingers of history. We are trying to protect the stuff because it can never be ever remade ever again. Or it can be reprinted, but it will never be the same, right? Nostalgia that we have, the things that we grow up with, the things that we live in through the decades of where we were born, you know come back for us all the time. And even though we would like to all jump into a different decade that we've never been, and say all nostalgia creeps in, but ultimately, that's what makes our society, right? I mean, we always try to go back to something that we can never have again because it's gone, right? And so, owning something for yourself and protecting something that you love, even if it's not just a hobby, but also family heirlooms,
Mhm.
really is value. It's value for you, and it's value for yourself and for everyone else. And that's why for my show, want I wanted the students to understand that they were valued, and that value means so much more than anything else. Because if you feel like you're expendable, you just feel like you're just another cog in the machine, right? And I don't want that for any students that I ever meet. I want them to feel something. I want them to get something out of it, and I want them to maybe put a little something on their shelf and appreciate it.
I love that. I love that so much. And I know everyone who is going to watch this is going to love that as well. It's so true, everything that you said. Thank you for that beautiful message.
You're
And,
welcome.
you're a wonderful editor. So, what editing software do you use, Carlo, and why? Why do you use it?
Well, I've used every editing software under the sun, just like what every editor should. But today, Premiere and DaVinci is the only two softwares I use now. And DaVinci is really where I'm really editing now, more than Adobe. uh, you know, we always have our memes about Adobe. Things every time you update something, it crashes. You have to save every 2 seconds. Because you never know if you're going to lose your project. DaVinci has never crashed for me at all, not up to at all. And Blackmagic has really taken the turn to really, create their software for, you know, this industry, right? I mean, they are known for having the greatest coloring editing software ever, right? And that's what they're known for. But now that they're finally implicating audio and editing and doing a whole package deal, I mean, it's a learning curve. I mean, don't get me wrong. Every software that you touch is a learning curve. Premiere is a learning curve. After Effects is 100% a long learning curve. You can go into CAD, you can go into like all these other different things, right? Um, but at the end of the day, if you really like color grading and like having the ability to, work with your metadata, that this is where it's going to be, and it's now software is getting easier, cameras are getting easier to really ingest stuff, and so it's getting better, and with all the new updates, it's just gonna get better, better, better until they can't do anymore.
It's so true, so true. Very well said, thank you. And so you're open to, doing editing gigs, you're open to work, you're open to working on productions?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. As of late, I haven't worked on any film or TV or commercials or anything at the moment, because, I've had a lot of things come up, but I've been pivoting over to AV work. And unfortunately, this is going to not just go for me, but I think this is going to go for a whole bunch of other people within the film industry. After COVID, it devastated everybody, right? I mean, a lot of people left, a lot of people moved on, and trying to get the work. If you were lucky enough, congratulations. You know what I mean? COVID is not really around anymore, but the lasting effects have still made it hard for the industry, especially where I am, up here in Massachusetts. We have local 481, which is, Grip and Electric. And those guys are not, some of the guys I know in there are not actually working right now, and they have to pay their union dues, And, we have Fear of the Walking Dead, Dead City season 2 being made right now. And there is good amount of people working on it, but there's not enough. Only a set amount of people that have gotten able to get in. They're lucky enough, but everybody else is,
Mhm.
unfortunately, they're not getting anywhere. And so a lot of people have actually pivot over to AV, audiovisual technicians, for anyone who doesn't know what AV stands for. But yeah, I've seen a lot of people move over to it because they have to pay the bills. They have to do something. It's not what they want. I don't blame them. They want to be creative. They want to, shoot something. They want to set lights up. They want to, do a whole bunch of stuff. But, if the work's not there, what are you going to do? And so Boston's taken a huge hit. And I've been out of the loop for a while, so I don't know exactly how big, but from everyone that I've been able to still have connections with, they, they're crying right now.
I'm
In
sorry.
the future that might change, but for now, as of right now, it is what it is.
Well, I do hope it does change. And Carlo, you just made a great point that it is kind of important to be in a creator hub. And but like you said, Boston, it can change on ne tomorrow or next week. So there can be shows coming up and all of that. Um, Fascinating. So thank you for sharing that. Is there anybody,
No,
we're gonna have to start wrapping the show up soon,
it's
but I
okay.
want to ask you, but I've enjoyed it so much talking with you, and I know everyone else is who's going to watch this, it will as well. Carlo, is there anyone you'd like to give a special shout out to or any kind of message? I mean, your message before a few moments ago was beautiful, but is there anyone you'd like to say thank you to or give a shout out?
Well, you know, yeah, for all the people that I've been able to work with, over the years, like my friend Ben Heald, Matt Sinclair, John Papp. These guys know me, and good friends. The Marsiga brothers, Jason and Brian. Uh, these guys have been troopers. They have, all of them have their own different collective things about themselves, but you can't. Good friends last forever, right? I mean, growing up and I've lost a lot of good friends, and even having the ones that are still around, means a lot, right? I always tell everybody, film family, AV family, broadcasting family is very important. The connections you make, can never be ever taken away, and the industry that we work in is so different from every other industry because it's everything, right? It is the world. If we are going to design a period piece, we have to understand history. And that's what the film industry is all about. And it's about storytelling. We create stories because that's who we are as human beings. And I always tell everybody, if you want to tell your story, tell it, even if I know money is always a big problem, and that goes for everything and everything that we deal with. But if you really are hungry for telling a story, you do it. You know, you try your best to make something worthwhile, and you move on. You keep learning from the mistakes you do, and you keep trying to advance your career, and not just go in for yourself, not just have an ego, but also bring the people along with you that you've already made connections with, because you can't do this by yourself. And it's impossible to make a movie with one army, right? It's a team. And if you create something that you're passionate for, you do it, and I hope, all independent filmmakers out there, find a way to do that. I mean, we can do things on our phones now. We can, everything's gotten smaller and smaller and smaller. And so we have the capacity of doing everything. And and we shouldn't lose hindsight from that, right? Because you don't need an expensive camera, you don't need the expensive lights, you don't need expensive dollies or jibs or anything. Create something, fucking just, pardon my French, but do it. Just do it. Like that meme, do it. But ultimately, yeah, like for the friends I just shouted out, those guys, I would take on every single project I could ever, if I could ever do anything, because, they have something for themselves and they're unique, and it's a wonderful thing, you know?
Love
So
that. Thank you so much for sharing that. It was so nice to hear. And any of those wonderful friends, I hope that you have a nice coffee with them soon and that you get together and catch up,
plan to.
all of that, right? So I want to say, we're gonna have to close the show soon, but I just want to say that Carlo, thank you so much. You are a star, and
Thank you.
you're a special VIP, and I wish you the very best. I wish you all of your cinematic dreams that to come true. We're sending that out into the universe for you to surround you with a lot of support and love. And we hope that you come back again. And when we talk next time, I want to hear an update on all the fun things that you're doing. And I want to
Well,
hear about that school masterclass program and all the good things that happen to you. Okay, so
yeah.
until next time.
Until next time, thank you very much for this interview, and thank you again for everything. I
Thank you so
appreciate it.
much. Take care. Thanks again, Carlo. Bye bye.
You too. Bye bye.